Salutations everybody, it is Maddie here today. Hope you're all doing absolutely excellent. Before we get into a ton of chaos, some positivity. Look at Forrest. He's so cute. He's sound asleep down there. That's everything great I have to show you today. Everything else after this point is hellfire. Let's talk about it. I thought the comments on our last Xbox news video talking about the reset was just fantastic. A lot of you kind of talking about the joke I made opening the video where I found the rakes. And people were like, is it really a rake if it's necessary? That's been in my head since that video, and we have the opportunity to really expand that conversation today. So thank you so much for just being part of what I do here. I want to talk about that a little bit because the news is not lightening up for Xbox at all following an otherwise pretty stellar summer showcase and opening to Asha Sharma's reign. Let's start off playing my favorite Xbox game, which is Track What the Executives Say. So February 2026, this is when Asha Sharma stepped in, replacing Phil Spencer. And it's here we get this wonderful headline from PC Gamer that there are no layoffs planned at Xbox. The full quote is that Matt Booty says, "My focus is on supporting the teams and leaders we have in place and creating the conditions for them to do their best work. To be clear, there are no organizational changes underway for our studios." Well, obviously, many of us who have been around Xbox for a while said, we'll wait and see on that. New leaders usually means they're inheriting a business that's not theirs, and they're going to change it to their vision, which means usually a lot of organizational restructuring. Building on top of that, very recently, Satya Nadella hosted a little bit of a talk. He was mainly focusing on AI, but he was asked about the Xbox reset. He says, Asha is really 100 days in, and she put out a post saying in the next 100 days, she's going to take a fresh look and make sure we deliver on what our fans expect for us both on the hardware side and the publishing side. The challenge now for us is to think about how do you innovate both in hardware as well as in the games going forward in a world in an economically viable way. We've invested a lot. No one can accuse Microsoft of not having invested for the last 25 years. And now we have to turn this into a sustainable business that delivers what is fundamentally one of the best sources of entertainment. The challenge we have is that we've not been monetizing that entertainment. If anything, we've been subsidizing that entertainment. In fact, there's more monetization of Xbox games happening on YouTube at Microsoft. Unfortunately, because of what's happening with the cloud and AI, the prices have gone up. It's happening with PCs, it's happening with phones, and Xbox is impacted as well. The scarcity of semiconductor supply and memory in particular is having a massive impact on consumer electronics. That's a temporal thing that I think we'll get through. It's not going to be permanent. There is a permanent thing, which is what's the Xbox model going forward? PCs and consoles both have their place. Obviously, mobile has people playing elsewhere, and so we now have to bring it all together while staying true to what we've always done. So Xbox needs to monetize further, but also the key thing, the quiet part really said out loud here, is it needs to become a sustainable business, which suggests that Satya views it as unsustainable as it is, which is what leads us into today's bloodbath. When you start to see headlines like this about Gears of War E-Day, which will be running Xbox $400 million to develop, and it's now an exclusive game to a much smaller platform. I think that is great for the hardcore fans who are going to get a very valuable experience here, but this is effectively a sunk cost. And so with all of that there, it's time to talk about the studio shutdown candidates that have leaked, the actions they can take, and of course, again, is this a rake or is this necessary business? I think we'll have a more permanent stance on that when the news is actually real. Right now, we are talking about rumors and leaks, but I still wanted to open that conversation with you all, continue it, and then conclude it whenever this news kicks off. So if you're new here, you're into what's going on with Xbox, I don't blame you if you don't subscribe. I normally say get subscribed, but I don't blame you if you're like, man, this is exhausting. I just want to play some games, but we do that too. So get subscribed for that. Today's headlines really begin with Insider Gaming. They write, Xbox to close south of midnight developer Compulsion Games. They write, quote, an award-winning studio is facing closure. Insider Gaming sources can confirm Xbox is planning to close south of midnight developer Compulsion Games. News of the pending closure was first reported by Ethan Gack and Rebecca Valentine at Kotaku. Speculation of the studio's future began to pick up late last week and over the weekend. In that time, multiple sources, including high-level employees at Compulsion, spoke to Insider Gaming under the condition of anonymity. Despite work being in progress on the next game at the studio, employees say there has been a worry and fear for months. After Phil Spencer stepped down earlier this year, that fear grew as many said they felt changes were going to come down under new leadership. Quote, it didn't matter who took over, end quote, one source said, end quote. We all talked about what it meant for us. No one was confident we'd be okay, end quote. Another high-level employee said that the messaging coming into the studio didn't do anything to calm nerves. Quote, nothing was definitively said about Compulsion Games being in trouble, but there was nothing said to assure us that things were okay, end quote. They said, quote, we were just left hanging when the topic would be brought up. Just feels like a matter of time, end quote. Since then, rumors have suggested that Compulsion was made aware that they would be shut down, and now Kotaku is reporting that they are in negotiations with Microsoft over the studio's fate, but the detail of said negotiations have not been disclosed, so this is an ongoing story. What this could lead to, for those who are wondering, is a similar situation to what happened with Tango Gameworks. The studio was to shut down, but then they were kept open because they were given over to Krafton, which we don't know how that will all end up, but at least right now it looks like Compulsion has a chance to stand on its own 2 feet. I feel like it's still going to result in a lot of scaling back, because you have to imagine with the development timeline of South of Midnight, they emptied that war chest. Will they be able to stand on their own enough to either acquire funding from another publisher to finish their current project? Will they have to take an early access route? Can they even buy themselves out? These are all questions we don't have answers to. Before I talk a little bit more about the rake, let's get into the other studio candidate that had leaked thanks to Mike Straw, also of Insider Gaming. When he was posting about how he had heard there are multiple studios in play to be shut down, he then posted on Twitter, fine, 2 of the studios I've been told, including getting messages from employees at the locations who are scared, are Compulsion and Arkane. Despite public messaging, many within the studios have expressed real worry and have overheard conversations about the future of the studios. He's reached out for Xbox for comment, but to no avail thus far. Now, we know Arkane Lyon is working on Blade. This game had gotten missing for a while now, but at least Dinga Bakaba had been out on Twitter saying, hey, we're still working on it, things are going fine. The lead concept artist just recently responded to the game not appearing at the Xbox showcase, saying, let us cook. This is what Dinga said on the Game Awards stage when the game was announced. He said, hey, we're going to go away for a while, but let us cook. And then there was Matt Booty's recent comments on the game when asked where it went. This is when he was talking with Variety. They wrote, there was no Blade in this year's showcase. I was hoping for Blade, so when will we see it? And he says, it's a big show. I can't fit everything in. It's a big show, and there are other beats coming up in the year. So you see that and you think, okay, Gamescom, the Game Awards, maybe we'll see it then. So they say, so there's potential to hear something later. And he says, there's always potential to hear more about things that didn't show up today. So effectively a non-answer. But these are your 2 studio candidates. Arkane Lyon is a bit surprising because they're working on a Marvel game, and I feel like that does at least have some chance of being successful. Their last game, while I was not a big fan of it, was Deathloop, which a lot of people seem to really like. But this is also the nature of the beast when it comes to licensed games. We saw how even PlayStation, with something as popular as Spider-Man, was struggling to turn a profit. We don't know the ins and outs of that deal. This is already a game that was a little chaotic upon its announcement, because it was at a time where Xbox didn't even put their own brand on this trailer announcement, even though it was their own first-party studio. I will just say that I'm not surprised that Bethesda Studio is included in this, because they always seem to take collateral damage in otherwise mismanagement with Xbox Game Studios. I mean, we've seen how they've canceled things within ZeniMax Online Studios. Tango's gone after their best game yet, and I'm a massive Evil Within fan. And now Arkane Lyon might take some splash damage again. And that's just focusing on studio closures. We're not even talking about just massive amounts of layoffs that are going to hit these teams that people like Asha Sharma, Matt Booty deem are running inefficiently. They don't need the headcount. So the question we're going to return to here is this actually them stepping on a rake, or is this really necessary? Unfortunately, the answer is neither yes or no. I feel like there is a level of letting teams find themselves, letting them experiment. At the same time, I feel like it's on the leaders to understand the creativity that is required for these projects while also balancing what keeps them in business. I will never agree with the move that Phil Spencer made when he had bought Compulsion Games to let them spend as much time as they did on South of Midnight. I don't like to equate length of a game to value. South of Midnight had a lot of other issues, but usually when a game is smaller, yes, go figure, it takes less time to make. And so when South of Midnight was in development for multiple years and it comes out and it's a sub 10-hour game, the story is unfinished, the gameplay is a bit repetitive, and then my opinions on the game aside, it doesn't do well on literally any other platform, appeals to no one. It was a complete waste of time and money, unfortunately. That is the harsh truth of it all. That's not to say I want them to shut down, but I think it's just as much on the team who wants to be creative and has to understand that there's a give and take. You're a business too. You need to provide value to your fans. I just try to reconnect with that feeling I had when Xbox bought these teams, which was basically taking games that were realized on a smaller scale, like a We Happy Few, very procedurally generated, very BioShock inspired though. Now with an Xbox budget, they can go more in the BioShock direction, create more hero assets, keep the personality, but create a more distinct, memorable world. But they went and did South of Midnight. If you paid attention to job listings, they went on immediately to do another brand new IP. To me, in that instance, I can't fully view that as a rake. At the end of the day, it is the unfortunate reality of the business. You stay in business based on not your social relevance, but how many copies of sales you can generate with your games, and based on not only your history, but your outlook of what you're working on next. That's why the rake in this case, if it is actually going to happen, I think would be Arkane Lyon. I think this is a team with tremendous potential. Granted, I'm a little biased though. I felt like Arkane Austin could have used a second chance after Redfall to actually make the thing that they're known to be making, which I know they lost a lot of that talent. So again, maybe they just ultimately made the right call shutting that team down, but you lost a visionary. And I just think that should never be the case because yes, in Xbox's eyes, they're like, we're buying IP, we're buying studios, but you're really paying for the talent that made these things even worth buying in the first place, and you've lost it all. As I've said many times before, Bethesda is one Todd Howard away from Xbox losing every ounce of value that's been packed away in that entire acquisition. And I can't imagine as they continue to gut Bethesda in the case of Arkane Lyon potentially, but also push that focus of Fallout and Elder Scrolls, something that we already know Todd doesn't like. Even if I think that is ultimately the correct call, they did pay for that, and it is something that needs a lot more focus. It's something that Bethesda themselves should have taken care of before they were told to. But I could see a world where that results in some sort of departure. I've said that already, and I could just see that increasing if Bethesda is going to be targeted again. And it just feels like with every story that breaks about these studio closures, a new name gets added to the list, and Xbox is just about to completely clean house here. We had Compulsion on our list. This was a little bit more expected. Arkane Lyon, as we'll talk about in a little bit, a little less expected. But then you look at companies like Double Fine, makes a little bit more sense. But even thrown in there is Ninja Theory. Here's what Jason Schreier of Bloomberg had to write in a recent article on Bloomberg. Several studios in Microsoft's Xbox gaming division, including Compulsion Games and Double Fine, are in active negotiations to spin off as they try to thwart closure, according to people familiar with the company's plans. Also, Ninja Theory, the maker of Hellblade, is in conversations with Xbox, as are several other studios across the portfolio that are at risk of being shuttered. The studios may still have the opportunity to buy themselves back from Xbox and go independent, although many employees will likely lose their jobs as a result, said the people who asked not to be named because they were not authorized to speak to the press. Employees at several studios have been informed of the situation and given permission to seek new work, but we're told that the status of the studios is still in flux. So keep in mind that this article from Schreier is mentioning a lot of the likely names, and he's also saying that there are other studios across Xbox that are at the risk of being shuttered. So this could be more massive than we imagine, but Ninja Theory just announcing a new game, one that is responding directly to player feedback. People who wanted Hellblade 2, but more combat, more open areas, more exploration, more of a video game, seem to be getting that with Senua. To have that be announced at the recent showcase and then read, a little bit more than a week later that they're in conversations to try to keep alive, this is the most Xbox news of all time. So we'll see what studio closures show up, as I'll get into with some Nate the Hate rumors in a moment here. It seems like it's going to be a bloodbath either way, but already I think some bad signs are cropping up, and we're still about a couple weeks out here. The Game Business reports that Xbox Game Studios boss Craig Duncan has stepped down. Their report reads, the head of Xbox Game Studios, Craig Duncan, has stepped down after more than 18 months in the role. Duncan replaced former studios boss Alan Hartman in November 2024 and oversaw Halo Studios, The Coalition, Flight Sim, Turn 10, Playground Games, Rare, Obsidian, Ninja Theory, Compulsion Games, The Initiative, Double Fine, In Exile, Undead Labs, World's Edge, and Xbox Game Studios Publishing. He departs the organization this week. His studios will report to Matt Booty until a replacement is found. Duncan has been part of the Xbox organization since 2011 and is best known for running highly regarded UK developer Rare for nearly 14 years, where he oversaw the Kinect and Sea of Thieves era. Do you notice a difference here? No planned replacement. This was a sudden exit. When Alan Hartman left, Craig Duncan was already set to take on this role. He's there for about a year and a half and pieces out. Right before the bloodbath, this reads to me like Craig saw the plan and said he's out. Again, because there's no replacement ready, and this is happening right before the bad news. The report continues on saying, meanwhile, Xbox Game Studios Chief of Staff Louise O'Connor will be leaving the company. O'Connor joined Rare in 1999, beginning as an animator on cult favorite N64 game Conker's Bad Fur Day. She's worked on numerous art and production roles at the UK studio and even won a AIAS award for voicing the character Lifos in Viva Pinata. She left Rare following the cancellation of Everwild in 2025 before becoming Chief of Staff in September of that year. In an email to staff, Duncan wrote, "When I stepped into the role of leading Xbox Game Studios 20 months ago, my purpose was to serve our studios, our teams, and the people making our games. Together, we set out to deliver high-quality games, strengthen the cultural fabric across our studios, and help shape the future of the business. I'm proud to say we've delivered many flawless launches that drove business success for the company." On O'Connor, he said that Louise has been thoughtful, creative, and a trusted partner who has consistently championed the craft and supported our studios with clarity and care. I'm grateful for everything she brought to Xbox Game Studios, and I'm sure she'll be successful in whatever comes next for her. One other option worth considering in this conversation where we don't know everything for sure is that Asha Sharma is looking for her own set of leaders for a place like Xbox Game Studios. This was someone Phil Spencer had put in place. And so we all know it's kind of like a sports team where, you know, the general manager wants their guy as the head coach. That's usually how it ends up going. And so I think this could be an option here, but given the timing of everything, you'll have to pardon me for not really leaning in the direction of believing that. It is a shame to see this though, because one thing I did like about Craig Duncan is he absolutely addressed publicly how Xbox had really suffocated its own releases. I think of last October, which could now no doubt lead to some of these changes here where they launched the Xbox Ally, Keeper, Outer Worlds 2, Ninja Gaiden 4, all in like a same week stretch. It was absolutely absurd. All of them were at least out in the same month, which they could have been spread out more. And as we read in a Jez Corden report, games like Ninja Gaiden 4, games like The Outer Worlds 2, games like Keeper, all flopped. So really sucks to see, and that stuff's avoidable, but I like that they were open about that issue. And we've seen this year, they have tried to spread out their releases. And speaking of high-profile exits, here's the studio head of Treyarch marking his exit. They say, "We're incredibly grateful to Mark for his steady guidance and deep care for the studio, its culture, and its people. Mark's impact on the franchise has been immeasurable, from Call of Duty 2 Big Red One and Call of Duty 3 to World at War and the entirety of the Black Ops series." That's because he's been there for 22 years and has decided to now retire. As we look ahead, we're pleased to announce that Treyarch's Kevin Hendrickson and Yale Miller will step into the role of co-studio heads. Kevin and Yale are veterans of the franchise with decades of development and leadership experience, both bringing a wealth of deep game knowledge and a shared commitment to Treyarch's culture and creative ambition. From all of us at the studio, thank you, Mark, for your leadership, friendship, and all you've achieved to make Treyarch such a wonderful place to call home. This could just be a separate event, but like I've said with everything else, it's all happening around the same time. It makes it really difficult to imagine it's anything else, but maybe even the Call of Duty factory getting hit with some significant layoffs. This would also be a shame because I do still quite enjoy Treyarch, and some of my most fond Call of Duty memories come from Treyarch-made Call of Duty video games, especially World at War when I was in middle school. That was a pivotal video game, but also the Black Ops series is what made me a competitive Call of Duty player for such a long time. But now we have to get into more of the rumors surrounding it, because I think that's where a lot of the anxiety lies in this conversation. Obviously, we're starting to see more firming up of who's actually going to be shut down. And while it's tough news to read, I'm glad these teams have time to prepare their portfolio and start getting their work out there. And hopefully they can land on their feet a little bit quicker than they otherwise would have if this was surprise news. But let's start off with Chris Avallone. He wrote, "Apparently Microsoft Studios, who had been told in the past that layoffs wouldn't affect them, are getting a different message now after the recent announcements. Formerly Safe Studios are now telling employees that they aren't sure how the management changes will impact the studio. A lot of uncertainty, even with studios who have had steady releases under Microsoft." Now, why is this important when, Maddie, you're basically rereading what's already been reported? This arrived before the reports, and we know who Chris is connected to closely, and that's Obsidian. I love Obsidian, and I think that would be the stunner of it all, is that I think there should be some type of reward for being consistent, especially in this particular ecosystem where we see developers taking ages to put out games. Obsidian put out a lot. They may not be your favorite, and I totally understand and respect that. But especially for Xbox, who had a known deficiency in just the simple act of releasing video games when you own so many studios, Obsidian was there through thick and thin, and I feel like Chris has to be talking about Obsidian here because they have been steady with the releases. You can't name many others this generation who have been steady. Think of the 2022 year. Everything gets delayed out of the year. Guess who's left standing? Obsidian, with Pentiment, with Grounded. Are these system sellers? No. But I think the harsh truth that we have to absorb here is we already read through Bloomberg, Avowed, and Outer Worlds 2 flopped. Josh Sawyer has admitted that Pentiment didn't sell super well either, which wasn't really surprising. So all you've got is Grounded, which has sold incredibly well for them, and it was made with a much more lean team. We know that there's this new game in development at Obsidian that is what brought Tim Kaine back in the building, and it is just going to be a real shame to see if they lay off a lot of that veteran talent. Your Leonard Boyarskis, of course, Josh Sawyer, John Gonzalez. You have Tim Kaine back in there. Like, you have all of that OG talent. You look at that, man. It would be such a shame to see them gutted, especially when for all the flops, they have been consistent. And I do think they just need the right IP, aka Fallout. But I digress. That's why this rumor was significant. Nate the Hate got involved a little bit on Reset Era. He said it's going to be a bloodbath. Lots of layoffs are expected across the entire Xbox division. So that means really nobody is safe here. He also mentions that South of Midnight had a high budget and sold terribly, unfortunately, just reaffirming that fact in all of this. And he does also say, because this is a company that's been brought up a lot, Double Fine has a clause to buy out and go independent, similar to Toys for Bob. And these are the main teams that I think all of us really worried about. Your Ninja Theories, Compulsions, Double Fines, where did they all end up? And it seems like if they've got the money in the war chest, they will have an opportunity to go independent. I really hope we don't lose teams like Double Fine. Again, with Keeper and Kiln, not my cup of tea, not something I'm going out of my way to play, but Psychonauts 2 is a masterpiece. One of my favorite games of the generation. It would be absolutely horrible to lose the team behind that. But to speak honestly about the topic, I do have to say that this does come down again to what I said about in the middle part of this video, about finding the right IP and leaning into them as much for the creativity of your studio as well as the survival of it, right? That is what you are defined by, is by making entertainment that people want to engage with. And I don't think projects like Keeper or Kiln, no matter how small they were or how cheap they were to make, really help the team out in just absorbing time and talent and resources away from what I think a lot of people were looking for, which was a Psychonauts 3, which Double Fine has never shut down the possibility of. But this reminds me a little bit of what we said about a lot of these teams. Too little, too late. What I'm going to be, just more as an enthusiast interested in reading, is sort of the post-mortem on this. What are the reflections from this? Is the right choice to, if you're Obsidian, man, we should have just done New Vegas 2. We should have pushed for that. Is it shoulda, woulda, coulda? Is it sort of it is what it is. We're glad we did what we wanted to do because we know with a company like Microsoft, they were going to get rid of us anyway. But someone like Tim Schafer sold Double Fine to Microsoft specifically for the safety net. And we heard how with Psychonauts 2, they helped make that game better. So this is the loss of Phil that you're going to start to feel here, is that all these relationships with these individual game creators he made, Asha has none of that. That is one of the negatives of bringing someone in who has no attachment to the games. You have the positive, which is she might be making some rational decisions, but the negative is that she's going to destroy relationships with legends. So yeah, no doubt, none of this is great news at all. I'm trying to hold back my reaction, if you couldn't tell, as best I can until the news actually breaks, because it's getting wild out there. And I am really interested to see how Xbox is going to respond to this. Are they just going to let it go for the next couple of weeks until they can officially put the statement out there? What is the plan? Because they're obviously waiting for the quarter to end. So I don't know if they can advance this news, but we'll see what they do. Until then, we'll be here talking all things Xbox, and I'm going to pass it to you now. What are your thoughts on how Xbox is moving? How are you feeling about the studios that might be cut here? Is this a rake or is this rational business? I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag in that conversation, but I'd love to hear your thoughts down below, because again, the conversation on the Xbox Reset video is fantastic. So I'm looking forward to reading more. Thanks for being a part of this. Let me know what you're thinking down below. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.